Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. My name is Bill Horan. I'm here with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Zac Turkel. And today we're taking flight into the atmosphere with our guest, who is an expert on the skies and beyond.
Wow, I've always wanted to be like Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond.
Oh, do I have to put up with that today? Well, our guest could potentially help you, Zac. I'm happy to introduce you to Andrew Parton. He's the president of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center, which is part of Museum Row here in Garden City. Andrew, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Oh, happy to be here.
Andrew, what is the Cradle of Aviation? For people who don't know, I think we've heard the term, but what is it really?
Well, we're a museum dedicated to the rich history and the rich role that Long Island played in aviation and space history, dating back to right after the Wright brothers took off. So the collection has been meticulously put together over a period of about 30 years of pieces of aircraft and other artifacts that are tied to Long Island. So everything in the museum has a piece of Long Island in it. In
and
one way,
literally, I think, wasn't it right here within half a mile or so, the Wright brothers took off?
Well, the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk in North Carolina.
Lindbergh, right?
Lindbergh took off at Roosevelt Field.
That's what I'm thinking
yes,
of. Okay.
Roosevelt Field. But we're located at what was Mitchell Field, which is the military base, sat side by side with Roosevelt Field. And prior to that, it was the Hempstead Plains. And we like to say that the reason we're the cradle of aviation, we're not the birthplace, because that's Kitty Hawk, is that the industry and aviation in general grew up here. And the reason it grew up was a number of reasons. One was the proximity to New York City. And everything in the early days of aviation was about prize money, being the first to do something, fly the Atlantic, fly coast to coast. And there were a number of organizations in New York City. There were newspapers and wealthy individuals, as well as societies like the Explorers Club, who'd put up prize money. The other benefit Long Island had is the topography. We were flat, and if you're in the area on normal days, it's windy still, even despite the office parks that's around here. So the museum is dedicated not just to the role Long Island played in aviation history, but it's the history of Long Island as well, which is
very interesting already. I didn't know all of that.
And when did the Cradle of Aviation open?
Formally, it opened in 2002 in its present state, which is 8 museum galleries, a 300-seat dome theater, and a collection of over 75 planes and spacecraft. Prior to that, it existed in the old hangars of Mitchell Field as a purely voluntary organization. So you had a number of restoration volunteers, and you could just walk into the hangars and have a chat with them on the weekends.
Wow.
Kind of informal.
A very informal museum. Today, it's from 2002 to now in 17 years. We're still a young museum, as museums go. And we continue to look for ways to grow and reinterpret the history that we cherish here.
I'm sorry, Zac.
And was it always an interactive museum?
At the beginning, probably less so. As changing tastes in education and the short attention span that we are all living with these days, the role of interactive exhibits is becoming more and more important and crucial. When the museum did open, it was more static. Unlike an art museum, we can't just roll out a new piece of artwork and pull it off the wall and put up a new one. The planes are real. They're very large and difficult to move, so they stay a little static. But what we try to do is reinterpret the history as well as the science behind all these aircraft.
Wow.
It's fantastic hearing this, because I think we forget when we're so close to a birthplace or a historical location just how important it is and the role it played, because we pass it every day going back and forth to work or whatever we're doing, our business, and we don't even think of it. What was the purpose when the Cradle of Aviation, was set up and going forward?
Well, going back to probably the mid-'80s, there were a number of aviation enthusiasts who felt that the role Long Island played in aviation history as a whole was an important one. And they lobbied the local county government to support the project. And it took many, many years to get to the point where the county invested in building the museum and creating Museum Row, which we share with the Firefighters Museum and the Long Island Children's Museum, to make it a destination. Our role as probably sort of in square footage, we're one of the larger ones on Museum Row. So, and it's perfect for us because the aircraft are pretty large. But we have everything from our oldest plane is a 1909 Blériot that flew here at the Hempstead Plains up through an F-14 Tomcat, and we have one of 3 lunar modules that were built by Grumman and Bethpage that didn't go to the moon. There's one at the Kennedy Space Center, one at the Smithsonian, and we have the 3rd. Ours would have been Apollo 18.
Wow. This is the greatest history lesson
really
we could
nice.
get.
It's so cool.
And we have the expert here telling us, so what could be better than this?
Absolutely. And Andrew, what are some exhibits at the Cradle of Aviation, and which exhibit sticks in your head or a personal favorite of yours?
Well, being not as old as 1909 and the early days of flight, I grew up as a fan of the space program. So my favorite gallery is probably the Space Gallery. So in that gallery, we have probably one of the largest concentrations of artifacts tied to the Apollo program. And this being the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11's landing on the moon, we have a number of events and activities tied to the Apollo anniversary. So the Apollo missions, the artifacts we have, the lunar module we have, the simulators that the astronauts trained on that we have, kind of makes that an easy answer for me.
50th anniversary, and to know that I remember when that happened, you just made me feel very old.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I am very old, so...
That's all right.
Now, the Cradle of Aviation Museum, there's a dome theater and a planetarium there.
Yes.
What kind of events take place in those structures?
It's a 300-seat dome theater, giant screen dome theater, and we run a lot of documentary films as well as planetarium shows in there, which is tied directly to one of our 3 missions, which is education. So the museum has 3 missions. First is preservation, which is what all museums do. The second is education, using the museum as a teaching tool to get kids interested in the science behind aviation. And the third is inspiration. We're hoping to get kids excited about the science and a lot of the STEM focus that we have, science, technology, engineering, and math, so that they may want to become that next engineer, scientist, or even astronaut.
That's a great point, because, as I said, you've already got me excited about it. And coming into the interview today, I didn't even think about it really, other than what we're going to talk about. And already I'm saying, I'm sitting on the birthplace of aviation here, the Cradle of Aviation. I should know more about this, and I'm lucky to be talking to you.
I just want to let our listeners know that you were listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Zac Turkel. Along with me is Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Andrew Parton, who is the president of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center located on Museum Row in Garden City. And Andrew, the Cradle of Aviation Museum has a lot of events going on throughout the whole year, and I want to talk about the special anniversary coming up. You mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. What is the plan for this special anniversary?
Well, it'll take place on July 20th, which is a Saturday, and that is the actual 50th anniversary. In the museum today, and we've had it running for a year, we have a countdown clock, which is going to take us down to the actual second that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. Wow. So at the Apollo Moon Festival during the day, we're going to have a number of activities for families. We've invited a number of Long Island Space Shuttle astronauts to come in for astronaut encounters. We'll have rocket launches. We have a new film on Apollo 11 that will be shown in the theater. And we also have a recreated 1969 living room, complete with shag carpet, black and white TV, and lava lamps. So you could have your picture taken, as you might have done when, Bill, I'm sure you were only about 5 years old at the time.
Oh, he's being very nice to me, because I think he's been peeking in my window to get that picture. And stop laughing that hard. It's not that funny.
But, during the day we'll have that, and around about 4:17 Eastern Time we'll do the countdown, where we will lower to the ground from the ceiling of the atrium of the museum a very large lunar module model. So we're going to do a countdown to bring it down. In the evening we have another event, which will be more of a informal dinner dance with a 60s band. The astronauts will be around. It'll be great food. It'll be dancing. And then we're going to do a countdown again and show Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon, which took place 7 hours after they landed. So it's going to be about 10:40 in the evening.
That's fantastic. I mean, the memories you're bringing back.
So will you be playing music from 69? So will I hear a lot of the Beatles? Will I hear, in the year 25?
You'll hear a variety, and obviously that was also the year of Woodstock, so you'll hear quite a bit of that. We're encouraging people to come in their tie-dyed best attire and relive or live for the first time what 1969 was like, and why the landing of Apollo 11 on the moon was so impactful. Because if you think about it, we all know where we were when a lot of tragedies took place in our lives. This is the first, in my lifetime, it's the only positive event that I knew exactly where I was at that time.
It's just so amazing. And the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, it's of course a big deal. It's a big deal everywhere, but especially on Long Island, because this is one of the regions that tested equipment. We had Grumman for the successful moon landing. And I think I'm sure you have people coming up to you saying, my father helped build that, my grandpa, my uncle, my mom, my sister. What else is going on because of that? Because this could be a celebration for the entire year. Yeah,
we actually started the countdown about a year and a half ago, and a lot of it was to put a spotlight not just on the museum but on Long Island and the role it played in getting us to the moon. If you lived on Long Island, there were roughly 30,000 people working at Grumman. And thousands of men and women worked on the Apollo program. So 6 degrees of separation. Everybody knew somebody, either a relative or a neighbor who worked at Grumman. And it was something that they all took pride in, because we have a number of our volunteer docents worked on the program. So when you come to the museum, you might, when you're walking around the Space Gallery, run into somebody who actually worked at Grumman on the days of the Apollo program. So you're talking to somebody who is a big part of history.
This just gets better and better. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a good intro for what I'm going to ask you next, Andrew. If someone was interested, they're hearing about this, and they, oh, my uncle, or gee, wouldn't that be great to talk to someone? Someone wants to volunteer. Do you accept volunteers?
Yeah.
And what kind of, what should we know about the volunteers?
We have a couple of different volunteer programs. Some work in a restoration area where they will restore old aircraft for the museum itself. That's a smaller group. Most are docents in the galleries where they're...
I'm sorry, you used the word docent. What does that mean?
Docent is someone who will be kind of a guide through the museum. So they're in the galleries, they're knowledgeable about the different topics within the galleries, and they'll interact with visitors on a one-to-one basis.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah. And the amazing thing, people can actually be talking to someone who I guess literally had their fingerprint on some of these parts that are going into space. Well, and the I don't know what the right term would be. Vehicles, I'm going to say. I don't know whether you call it a rocket or a spaceship or whatever. But that's just so amazing.
Well, it's one of the neat things in the Space Gallery. In addition to the lunar module, we have Apollo 18. We have the first lunar module that was built. So it was called a test article, and it's a lunar module without its skin. And in that room, which recreates the clean room at Grumman, we have on the wall all the lunar modules built by Grumman, a picture of them, and circling the picture is signatures of all the workers. So almost every week we have somebody come in and saying, that's my dad, or that's my grandfather, or my grandmother, or whatever.
How wonderful.
Wow. So it really connects people to a time that was a big source of pride.
So another reason people should go there, go and pick out your relative and see if they were really there or taking a long lunch that day.
Absolutely.
Andrew, we want to find out a lot more, and I'm loving this, and I'm sure Zach is.
Yes.
But at this point in the show, we want to take a brief break. My name is Bill Horan. I'm here with Zac Turkel, and today we're talking to Andrew Parton. He's the president of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center, located right here on Museum Row in Garden City. You're listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Yoda, what should I do with this Land Cruiser I don't drive anymore?
Donate.
must.
Yoda's right. Right now you can donate your vehicle to the National Federation of the Blind by calling 866-282-7327. That's 866-282-7327. Or if you know a blind person who needs help, please email nfb@nfb.org.
A tax deduction you will receive.
And it doesn't take the force to be charitable.
And now we return to My Hometown.
Thanks for being with us today here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, along with Zac Turkel, and today we're talking with Andrew Parton. He's the president of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center located right on Museum Row in Garden City.
Andrew, does the Cradle of Aviation work with Long Island school districts, maybe with field trips and other learning opportunities?
Yeah, we school groups and local school districts are a big part of our mission and success. We generally average about 70,000 school kids a year coming through the door. We have what we call STEM partnership schools, which are programs with individual districts where they're making multiple visits to the museum. So we're taking the contents of the museum, the airplanes and the artifacts, and feeding it into the curriculum in the district. So they may come for a visit, we may go do an outreach and go visit the school, but we're giving them content that they can use to highlight the science behind a lot of the aviation feats and the space program feats that Long Island is famous for.
And Andrew, when you use the word STEM, or the term STEM, tell our audience what that means.
STEM is science, technology, engineering, math.
Or all the things I didn't do well in.
Or you may hear it called STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
I just heard that.
Yeah,
that
was in my hometown.
shows.
We did a few weeks ago.
That's right.
So both programs, it's kind of a focus, and what it is to try to drive and encourage kids, especially starting in elementary and middle school, to embrace science and technology. The issue for a lot of companies, those that are on Long Island as well as around the country, is a lack of kids going into science, and so this is trying to use different ways to spark that interest.
Trickery.
Absolutely.
And it's good training. No, I think this is fantastic what I'm learning. And I was going to say, can older people sneak in the back of the line or say, you're not in this class, would you throw me out?
Well, you have to take a test, which you probably won't pass. So.
I'm not going to pass it. There we go, Zac.
It's okay, I won't pass either.
You're a smart guy. I'm not going to get in. But the educational programs, they sound so interesting to me. Can you give us a little insight into them when the kids come in? And at what grades do these start?
Our target tends to be middle school and high school kids, and we tailor the programs to them. So, a simple program we do is something called Fly by Math, and that's been designed with the Federal Aviation Administration, and it's really using math skills to decide the speed of aircraft coming into an airport, the weight of aircraft coming in, and so you're air traffic control, and you're going to have to decide who's coming in first, who's coming in second, who's taking off, based on using math formulas. We also do a lot of programs tied to sort of famous events. If you remember the movie Apollo 13, and they used the lunar module as a lifeboat. And they were running out of oxygen, so they needed to create a filter based on material that they just had on hand in the spacecraft. And in the movie, you have all these brilliant scientists taking all the stuff that's available and saying, okay, use this to make a filter. And so we do things like that to get kids interested and show them that as a team, you have to make something that works, especially in the heat of the moment. One program we did, we had the kids go through that effort. They watched the Apollo 13 movie, and then we brought in to discuss it was Apollo 13 astronaut Fred Hayes.
Wow. I would, I don't know, it can't get much better, but
yeah.
I just wish they had these things. Of course, I'm sure they did in some degrees when I was in school. That was a long, long time ago. But when you say about the interest, I'm sure some kid just sees that plane and talks about this. If I did the math you were talking about, a lot of planes would crash.
Sure.
We would have a real mess out there. But I guess it's simulated, so that's a good thing. We learn what not to do.
Right.
Don't do what Bill Horan does, do what Zac does. But you would teach us the right thing. But I think it's just so great. Some are going to be naturally attracted. Others may find something else in there. I
think what we also try to do is show that within, let's say, aviation, There are more jobs than just a pilot and a flight attendant. There's probably 1,000 jobs in between that most kids and parents and teachers have no idea about. But they're needed, they're important, and it's an industry that for the next 30, 40 years, the growth in the industry in aviation and aerospace is just unlimited with the amount of people flying today, the amount of new aircraft, the use of UAVs or drones and how those are working, and the space program is being reinvigorated.
I'm just thinking, are you already working on the ideas for the drone museum? Because that the little kids would love. They'd be buzzing us.
Well, we have a drone competition where they make a drone out of Legos and they get to fly them within the museum atrium.
I have a nephew. We're going to talk about that after the show because he loves Legos. So, Zach?
Wow, that's so many fun activities. And I also found out that there are also competitions as well. What are some competitions that the Cradle of Aviation Museum hosts?
For younger kids, we do an egg drop competition where they get to drop an egg in a contraption that they create from the 3rd floor of our atrium.
Is this like Galileo?
Kind of. It's Galileo. It's Newton's law of gravity. It's going to fall, but you need to make a cushion so that the egg is intact when it lands. Mm-hmm. We have other competitions, solar wind, maglev competition where they're making cars that are going to fly on a maglev track.
What is a What does that mean?
It's kind of magnetic.
Oh, magnetic.
Yeah,
okay.
magnetic track that they build a car and then they have to run it. We have a solar wind program using renewable energy. And the tie-in for an air and space museum is that most of the technology for renewable energy came out of the space program. Solar panels are what fuels the space station. Wind turbines are propellers. So there's a lot of technologies that we benefit from today that most people do not realize, and we're trying to bring that to the forefront as well.
I think we're going to skip our other shows that we have today. We're just going to follow you on the way out and sneak in the back door.
Yes, we will. I just want to let our listeners know again that you are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Zac Turkel. And I'm with Bill Horan, and today we're talking with Andrew Parton, who is the director of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center located on Museum Row in the wonderful Garden City.
Andrew, besides the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, you have a lot of other events at the Cradle of Aviation. Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, we have a lot of sort of un-aviation-like events. We host the Chocolate Expo in March every year.
Definitely.
Which is an amazing thing because it's probably 10,000 people show up for one day of tasting chocolate and buying chocolate.
You couldn't figure a way to tie that in with aviation? Like if you're riding on a plane.
Chocolate airplanes, maybe?
There you go.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. We also do a craft beer festival called Hops and Props. So you get to taste a lot of different craft beers from around the region in the setting of the Aviation Museum. So most of the beer you're sipping is next to an F-14 Tomcat or a Hellcat from World War II or something along those lines.
This sounds like a fun place. You get to work early every day, and I bet you even work on weekends.
Oh, yes.
Chocolate, beer, what else? Cheeseburgers?
For many years, it was kind of a stretch. We had a tattoo festival going on, which was an interesting event, but it was good for the museum. We had.
I'll volunteer Zach for this year's contest if you want.
My mom is going to kill me.
That's okay. I'm still volunteering.
Well, she's not listening.
She's not listening.
No, she's not. Thankfully. And Andrew, for a first-time visitor to the Cradle of Aviation Museum, what would you tell them to do first?
I would tell them to walk through the galleries. As I may have said at the beginning, the museum is set up chronologically, so there's 8 galleries to take you through 8 periods of aviation and Long Island history. As I said, everything in the museum is tied to Long Island. So we don't have a 747 necessarily or a Japanese Zero or something like that. Everything has a connection to Long Island. It was either built here or the milestone was created here. So we have Charles Lindbergh's first airplane that he ever owned that's been restored. We have a sister ship to the Spirit of St. Louis that was actually used in the movie starring Jimmy Stewart. And the legend is that Lindbergh flew our plane in the early 60s. So as with most things in history, you go with the legend.
Wow.
Zach, did you have more to that? Or
yeah, and also, this is something that I am very interested in.
It's got to be food. That's all he's interested in.
if you're hungry at the museum because you're hungry looking at those airplanes because they're so big, there's something called the Red Planet Cafe. What is this food cultivated from Mars? What is that?
Well, it's an opportunity to go to the Red Planet, and without taking that 8-month trip, and you do get to come back. But it's filled with the normal hamburgers and hot dogs and Mars salads and stuff. Things you normally get at a restaurant.
Wow.
Now, Zach, watch. I'm going to become part of the creative department here.
All right.
I'm just thinking. Every year we see Joey Chestnut on television. I think it's on the 4th of July in a hot dog eating contest. If you could work something out that he sits in a plane and starts eating and has a little competition with some Martian guys or something, I think certainly Zach and I would be there.
I would be nervous about the possibility of a cleanup afterwards. So.
Yes.
Both from the Martian and Joey Chestnut.
From the other side. That's true, but I think it would be a lot of fun, and we could watch on ESPN. So now, the Cradle of Aviation is a nonprofit organization.
Yes.
Do you fundraise, or is it just through admissions, or do you sell things there?
We get about half the revenue of the museum is through admissions and catering revenue because we rent the facility out for different events. The rest of it we have to fundraise, about half of it. So it's from individuals, foundations, local government, the federal government and things like that, and going after grants. So it's a constant grind of trying to raise money, and you're competing against other worthy not-for-profits.
And I think we've had a lot of them on the show. I have to say, there's terrific groups on Long Island, everybody doing some good in a different direction with what they're doing. This has been so educational. And for students, what an opportunity to come for a class trip. And I mean, it's so handy right here in Garden City. Easy access to get to. You're not going into the city. You don't have to go out of state or anything. They can make it in probably half an hour from almost any point on Long Island and then enjoy the day there. So a lot of interesting parts.
Yes, and for anyone that wants to find out more information, Andrew, who can they contact? What's the phone information for anyone that's interested in volunteering or visiting the Cradle of Aviation Museum?
The general number is 516-572-4111, and that'll give you all information about what's going on as well as a directory of people to contact. And our website is www.cradleofaviation.org, which will list all the events and activities. My mind being as old as I am, I tend to forget, so it's better to go to the website than to count on me.
All right.
And I think you mentioned, and just to our audience, if someone's listening, if someone wants to volunteer, are there any requirements between low age, high age, or background?
We have student volunteers as well as retired individuals. A lot of them are either former school teachers or people who worked in the industry.
And I guess if anybody's listening who worked at Grumman, if you want to have some fun, go over there, take a look at it, and maybe volunteer a little time and contribute to the history and experience of the Cradle of Aviation. Andrew, we want to thank you for being with us, and we want our audience to be reminded our special guest has been Andrew Parton, the president of the Cradle of Aviation Museum and Education Center located on Museum Row in Garden City. Andrew, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for the time.
I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Zac Turkel, and thanks for listening to this week's edition of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.